Hello everyone, I'm Melanie Borg. This case study analysis has been conducted on United Airlines' latest PR crisis, the involuntary deboarding, also known as bumping, of a passenger, Dr. David Dow. This resulted in him being dragged off a plane with a bloodied face. It also led to global media outrage, a $1 billion share market loss, and alienation of an entire country and customer base, which was China. The crisis communications in this case are extensive, and therefore only the first two apologies on day 2 of the crisis can be analysed in depth. This case is an example of what not to do in a crisis, but also how to recover. United Airlines is a domestic and international carrier with a fleet of over 1,200 aircraft. They fly to 337 destinations in 54 countries and employ over 88,000 staff. They are the 6th largest airline in the world. United Airlines, which I will refer to simply as United from now on, have been plagued by crisis from as far back as 2001 on September 11, when 2 of their 4 aircraft hijacked during the US terror attacks belonged to United. Right up until recently, 2 weeks before the crisis we are about to analyse, in March, 2 young girls travelling on employee passes were refused boarding onto a United flight as they were wearing leggings, which were not allowed according to the dress code policy for all travellers using employee passes. This sparked global media coverage. United Airlines' denied boarding compensation policy was in line with federal laws. On the day the passenger was forcibly removed from a United aircraft by airport security, United had followed protocol. UA sought volunteers to be bumped, and reportedly 3 people had accepted. Compensation in line with federal laws and airline policy was offered. With 1 passenger still required to deboard, United selected a passenger according to their policy. Generally, passengers on the cheapest tickets are selected first. Selected passengers have no legal right or entitlement to remain on board the aircraft. As per United policy, which is a common policy among all airlines in the States, airport security was called when the passenger refused to deboard. Airport security removed the passenger, not United Airlines staff.
Oh my god. Oh my god. No! Oh my Guys, my god! What are you doing? No, this is wrong. Oh my god! Look at what you did to him! Oh my god!
I have to go home. I have to go home. I have to go home. I have to go home.
Now that we've heard some pertinent facts and seen the video, I'll investigate some theory before moving on to analyse the crisis handling itself. You've heard the saying, reputation is everything? Well, there are several academics who believe that, while reputation may not be everything, having past reputational crisis can affect how public react to crisis in the future. Essentially, corporate reputation is to some extent based on the past actions of an organisation. United's reputational history, unfortunately for them, is largely built on the events that happened to them, as we saw in a previous slide. How they handled those crises matters, and if the latest crisis is a reasonable yardstick, their handling was likely poor. In fact, their handling of the children wearing leggings crisis less than 2 weeks earlier was as cold and mechanical as their initial handling of this crisis. Coombs, Holiday and Dowling note that many managers believe that a good corporate reputation acts as a type of insurance policy the first time a company faces a crisis. Having had the leggings crisis reach mass international media less than a fortnight before, after a shaky reputational history, United Airlines were well and truly on the back foot when airport security entered Flight 3411 and were involved in the injuring of Dr. Dow. A history of crisis and prior negative reputation are both crisis intensifying factors, and United has them both. Within 24 hours of Dr. Dow being forcibly removed from the aircraft, a video of his bloodied face and protesting passengers had emerged on Twitter. What followed was a social media frenzy that was almost immediately picked up by mainstream media internationally. Expert opinions were sought, lay opinions were given, and social media users expressed almost exclusively outrage. An important fact in this situation, that it was not United staff that removed Dr. Dow but airport security, a completely different entity, was deemed either irrelevant or ignored completely, and the public rightly or wrongly placed blame squarely in the lap of United. How much blame and responsibility United should have reasonably taken, and whether it matters that blame could reasonably be apportioned, will be discussed later. CEO of digital management agency Electric Artists, Mark Schiller, said, "The first place a growing number of people go to find out what a company is doing during a crisis is not to their televisions or newspapers. It's straight to the internet to see not only how the company is responding, but how fast that response is coming and what others are saying about it." Without an immediate response on this situation, the internet judged United harshly within hours, riding a wave of vitriol and outrage. Schiller also said, "The internet accelerates and amplifies public opinion like nothing that has come before it, and in times of crisis, while corporate communications executives are preparing manicured statements, customers are blogging, emailing, and posting photos out of rage and desperation because the very people who should be listening to them aren't." United, however, were not preparing a manicured statement or even making an effort to gauge the public sentiment in order to prepare an appropriate one. United's handling of this crisis was aptly summed up in a title of a Washington Post article called "From Tone Deaf to Textbook." Crisis response strategy objectives are threefold: shape attribution of the crisis, change perceptions of the organisation in crisis, and reduce negative effect generated by the crisis. With a history of significant crisis, including one as recently as 2 weeks earlier, United was on the back foot. So let's get into the analysis. On April 10, 2017, 69-year-old passenger Dr. David Dow is selected as the passenger who must involuntarily deboard the plane. He refuses, stating he is a doctor and has patients he must see, so he cannot be delayed. Airport security is called to remove him, and in the scuffle that ensued, Dr. Dow was dragged down the airplane aisle with a bloodied face while horrified passengers watched on. That same day, a small portion of the video recording this event was posted on Twitter and it went viral. On April 11, parent company United Continental Holdings started the day on Wall Street having lost almost $1 billion in market value. The incident became a trending topic on Weibo, China's version of Twitter, with over 100 million views. China is a major growth market for United, and this had very real financial implications. At 2:27 a.m. on the morning of April 11, United CEO Oscar Munoz released United's first response, a short statement on Twitter. It read, "This is an upsetting event to all of us here at United. I apologise for having to reaccommodate these customers. Our team is moving with a sense of urgency to work with the authorities and conduct our own detailed review of what happened. We are also reaching out to this passenger to talk directly to him and further address and resolve this situation." This tweet only served to enrage social media users, broadcasters, and PR pundits further. Why? Because the most important SCCT principle was ignored. An unreserved apology was not given for a violent passenger incident. Based on that alone, publics would not have been happy, but that was not all that was wrong with this tweet. Munoz's use of the phrase reaccommodate customers was extremely impersonal. Public saw it as callous and a way to distance United from what they perceived to be violence against an innocent human being. Upon seeing the viral video of Dr. Dow's bloody face and dazed wandering up the aisle of the plane, stakeholders and publics did not see reaccommodating. They saw the results of what they presumed was physical violence towards a paying customer. Munoz failed on another basic principle of SCCT, to take responsibility and to address the safety of all stakeholders. He addressed the upset suffered by United, but showed no emotion or empathy for Dr. Dow. He did not meet the stakeholder emotions in strategic reply. It was a statement that was taken as cold, and by not taking immediate and full responsibility, was seen as a total denial of responsibility. When a crisis occurs, stakeholders actively look for causes of the events, particularly if the event has been negative. They attribute blame or responsibility and experience an emotional reaction to the event. Anger and sympathy are the core emotions of attribution theory. The bigger the gap between stakeholder expectations and organisation actions, the higher the crisis development risk. Crisis escalation occurs when stakeholder expectations are not met, and Coombs places the utmost importance on crisis responsibility and calls it the linchpin of SCCT. Still, on the 11th of April, aiming for a new angle on this crisis, Dr. Dow's local news website, the Courier-Journal, released an article about his troubled past, having surrendered his medical licence for 10 years for illegally prescribing medications, allegedly at times in return for sexual favours. But nobody cared. They saw Dow's past as being completely irrelevant to being presumed assaulted on this day. Publics dominate discussions on social media and direct the rhetoric. In this sense, during any crisis, those publics communicating on social media about the organisation and the crisis are crisis communicators, not just the organisation's PR team. These publics create their own crisis messages, respond to organisations' official crisis communications efforts, and have the potential to impact an organisation. In this case, a large portion of United's major growth market was communicating. About their perception that Dr. Dow's treatment was racial profiling. Weibo, China's version of Twitter, was exploding with this trending topic soon after the video was released and had over 100 million views within 24 hours. Publics were communicating and they were livid. Nothing Dr. Dow did in the past in any way warranted his assault, they reacted. Having realised his huge strategic misstep, Munoz released another statement at 12:10 p.m. on April 11 on Twitter, issuing a frankly impressive textbook apology, as though Timothy Coombs himself had written it. It said, "I'm sorry, we will fix this." It was textbook SCCT, but was it enough to rectify the damage that had been done by his first statement of non-apology? This latest one read, "The truly horrific event that occurred on this flight has elicited many responses from all of us. Outrage, anger, disappointment. I share all of those sentiments, and one above all, my deepest apologies for what happened. Like you, I continue to be disturbed by what happened on this flight, and I deeply apologise to the customer forcibly removed and to all the customers aboard. No one should ever be mistreated this way. I want you all to know we take full responsibility and we will work to make it right. It's never too late to do the right thing. I have committed to our customers and our employees that we are going to fix what's broken so this never happens again. This will include a thorough review of crew movement, our policies for incentivising volunteers in these situations, how we handle oversold situations, and an examination of how we partner with airport authorities and local law enforcement. We'll communicate the results of our review by April 30th. I promise you we will do better. Sincerely, Oscar." Coombs explains that the base response from organisations for all crises should be a public commitment to help prevent further harm and take care of publics physically first, and then help them cope psychologically by providing corrective information, telling people what is now happening to prevent another crisis. Coombs explains that the greater the threat, the more the organisation must demonstrate that they're taking responsibility for the crisis and be seen to be putting, in this case, passenger safety above the bottom line. This apology was textbook, except for the timing. Although publics received this apology well, they wanted to know why it took so long. One PR commentator said it doesn't take 24 hours to formulate a response that expresses concern for the human beings involved in the incident. Why did it take so long for them to say this? Likely, in some small part, that apology helped steer the company's shares to a loss of only $250 million at close of market that day. Using Coombs' situation crisis communication theory to evaluate the strategy of this crisis handling, we can see that United had begun to fail even before the situation arose. This crisis could have been prevented from even reaching issue status at several stages. Habitually overbooking flights, particularly to the extent that they do, whether it be industry standard in the US or not, did not have to occur. United could have bumped passengers before they boarded their flights, they could have offered more incentives when they had no volunteers, and in cases where a passenger refused to deboard, regardless of them having no legal right to remain on board, they could have chosen to bump a passenger less adamant. SCCT research has shown that crisis history should result in crisis managers selecting response strategies that accept greater responsibility and that demonstrate increased concerns for victims' needs than would normally be used for a given crisis situation. By accounting for the effects of crisis history, crisis managers can craft messages that more effectively protect the organisation's reputational assets. Of SCCT's 10 crisis types, this United crisis most closely aligns with the challenge type within the accidental crisis cluster. This is that stakeholders claim an organisation is operating in an inappropriate manner, and there is a public challenge based on moral or ethical, not legal grounds. In this case, publics did not distinguish between the perpetrators of the act, which were airport security not affiliated with the airline, and the organisation. Despite the fact that it was not United committing the act, and that being an important fact, legally in particular for United, it was not considered important at all to publics who have held United solely responsible in trial by media. Responsibility, Coombs agrees, is not a black and white matter of an organisation either being to blame or not, rather it's a scale of degree. In this case, United was deemed fully responsible. For this reason, when assessing the crisis and identifying which type of crisis was rapidly unfolding, had United had in place a crisis communications plan, they would have known that they are ethically responsible to protect stakeholders from harm, not necessarily to protect their own reputation. SCCT's key strategy is taking responsibility, and unequivocally being accountable for the treatment of Dr. Dow should have been United's #1 priority. Although this crisis falls under Cluster 2 of attribution theory and is accidental, therefore predicted to be only a moderate reputational threat, publics immediately saw this crisis as being preventable, therefore a Cluster 3 preventable crisis resulting in strong attribution of crisis responsibility, which can result in severe reputational threat. As crisis response strategy should meet public emotion, not the organisation's perception of what happened, United should have strategised around taking full responsibility for this preventable crisis from the beginning. In less than 24 hours of the video of Dr. Dow being removed was released onto social media, this event escalated from an issue to a Stage 2 crisis. The media and publics had amplified the crisis within hours, and Munoz's dismissive and cold first response amplified the situation further, almost escalating the crisis to Stage 3. Munoz and his crisis team managed to wrest this crisis from the brink of Stage 3 by eventually repeatedly following SCCT to the letter and meeting a rise in public outrage and media coverage with restatements of their commitment to Dr. Dow, to travellers and to change policy. Coombs explained that the bigger the crisis, the more the stakeholders must be seen as accepting responsibility and to focus response on helping victims and being accountable. United worked hard at this once their original strategy, if it could be called that, failed. Their website reflected changes as they happened, and they announced changes as they happened on social media. A journalist for PR Week commented that Munoz was led too much by legal and internal HR issues that caused him to miss the window of opportunity to make a strong, earnest apology, and his response wasn't consistent with United's stated missions and values. Saying sorry shouldn't be so hard. A good apology only needs to be said once, then it needs to be followed up with action to demonstrate good intent.